I almost said I was like, there's just like no way my hands would.
How much you want, Bill?
Give me a half.
$500,000?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I got you. Write it down. Raise. Oh, wait, hold on. It's
2,000, yeah.
what time is it by any chance? Is it time, Clayton?
Sorry? 6:30.
Thank you.
Oh, so we're doing dinner soon.
Oh, yeah, we got some
Right.
barbecue coming.
Nice.
Did we just talk about from?
I think it's Rudy's.
I think I have to.
Lodge is catering dinner for these guys in a few minutes.
In this episode of Weekly Poker Hand, we are playing 200, 400 with an $800 straddle at the Lodge. Folds around to Doug Polk in the hijack seat. He raises it up with ace-6 of spades. Suited aces are amazing. Folds around to Bulldog in the small blind. He has $200 in there. He has to call 1,800 more with the king-jack offsuit, and he does. This may look like a normal, standard, reasonable call, but given they are playing $140,000 deep, hands like king-jack, king-10, ace-9, queen-10, queen-9, all offsuit, these hands go way down in value. Now look, king-jack is fine. I certainly don't fault the call, but you have to be very, very careful with these hands, especially when you're deep stacked, especially when you are out of position. Fine, Bulldog calls. Over round to Bill Perkins in the big blind with ace-8 offsuit. I think once Bulldog calls, you should probably let the ace-8 offsuit go. I do know they are playing the stand-up game, the nit game, whatever you want to call it, so maybe that's a bit of an incentive to just stick around and try to see the flop so you don't end up having to pay everybody a little bit of money. But multi-way, ace-8 offsuit does really bad. Kind of like king-jack offsuit doesn't want to be out of position, deep stacked. Neither does ace-8 offsuit, especially when it's multi-way, because if a lot of money ends up going in the pot and Bill is sitting there with top pair, he's going to end up having to die with 0, which is not what he wants to do. Or maybe it is, who knows? He opts to call. Let's go to the flop.
Yeah.
Some Texas barbecue from up the street.
$3,400.
The flop comes ace of diamonds, queen of spades, 6 of clubs. Doug Polk has 2 pair. Bulldog checks his gut shot. Bill Perkins checks his top pair. Doug goes for a very reasonable $3,400 bet into the 6,800 pot. I think this is great. Given they are somewhat deep stacked, you should typically bet larger compared to if you are shallower stacked. If you are studying tournament poker, multi-way, you may find that if you're playing 40 big blinds deep, you should perhaps go smaller, like a third pot. But when you're deep stacked, you definitely want to build the pot so that you can get it all in by the river. And notice if Doug bets this size on the flop, he can bet kind of big on the turn and then potentially rip it all in on the river and get full value when he feels inclined, when 2 pairs really, really good. So I like this bet size. He may even want to go a little bit bigger because if anyone has an ace or a queen or a gut shot straight draw, they're just not going to fold. As we see, Bulldog calls the 3,400 with a gut shot to the nuts, which is probably reasonable enough. Then Bill Perkins calls as well with the ace-8. Now, you may say, top pair, of course he has to call. But no, he doesn't. You have to realize, multi-way in this situation, what's very often going to happen is on the turn, Doug's going to keep betting. And if he does keep betting, the ace-8 is going to shrivel up substantially. Now look, I do realize Doug is loose, aggressive, badly player, but he's not just going to go nuts playing 3 ways with something like 10-9 of spades if he doesn't turn any additional equity. So either Bill's going to end up playing a small pot with what is probably the best hand, or he's going to be put into a spot where he has to play a big pot with what may or may not be the best hand, and very often will not be. So I think facing the bet and the call, Bill should just let the top pair junkie kicker go immediately. Feels bad, but you have to be very careful, multi-way, out of position, and deep stacked. And if there's ever a spot to find a quick fold with top pair, this is it. Bill does not, though. Let's head to the turn.
3 players, 2 pair for Doug. Could be trouble once again for Bill. Just gets a little bit tilting when you're involved in big pots, losing at showdown, still with your nit button.
Not rich.
Dangerous spot being Bulldog stuck in the middle between these 2 maniacs.
Yeah, whatever. Just gut sizes. We've seen those guys. They're fucking boss.
The turn is the 5 of hearts, which doesn't help anyone, which means it helps Doug a lot. King Jack checks, Ace 8 checks, and then Doug goes for a bit of an overbet, $20,500 into the $17,000 pot. Seems a little greedy to me, but in loose, splashy, battley Texas games where you're playing the stand-up nit game, this is a spot where people will start to get somewhat sticky. Now look, usually you want to really bring out the overbets in a few main scenarios. The first is when the turn brings in a whole lot of draws that your opponents could logically have. Like say the turn was the 4 of diamonds. Maybe then you want to be using a slightly bigger bet. If it was something like the 9 of diamonds, you would definitely want to be using a bigger bet because in that scenario, your opponents could just have something like Jack 10 that floated the flop that picked up additional equity, and you want to apply a lot of pressure to those. I'm not sure the 5 of hearts is a card you normally want to be using overbets on, but given they are very deep stacked, and we're in Texas where people don't like to fold, and we're playing the stand-up game, sure, you just want to make sure your opponents will call in this scenario with hands like an ace or a queen, because those are the hands you're trying to get value from. If your opponents are going to fold those to this large bet, though, then this bet size becomes a bit of a disaster because you do get protection, but you massively fail to extract value. Let's see if this was a good bet or not.
First star.
Little bit of implied odds here, though. Somehow, some way, Bulldog just binks off a 10. He's getting paid big time.
There's the call.
But the correct fold and the call from Bill, and he needs an 8. And an 8 only.
8 ball, corner pocket.
King Jack makes the easy fold against the 1.3x pot bet, and then the Ace 8 from Bill Perkins calls, which is exactly what Doug Polk wants, which probably makes this a very good bet size by him. The question becomes, though, should the Ace 8 find the call? And it's a rough spot, kind of like on the flop, when Doug bets into 2 people, he probably has something, right? And once Bulldog calls, the Ace 8 should probably just let it go on the flop. On the turn, when Doug keeps betting into 2 people, on a turn that doesn't really bring in a whole lot of logical draws for Doug to keep bluffing with, Doug probably has something, right? So if the turn brought in a few additional draws, like say the turn was the 5 of diamonds instead of the 5 of hearts, putting up a backdoor flush draw, maybe that's the spot where Doug will keep betting with stuff like 10-9 of diamonds if he decided to bet that on the flop for whatever reason. But on this brick 5 of hearts, I don't really think Doug's betting the flop too often with stuff like 9-7 suited or 8-7 suited. He may, but maybe not. I mean, it's a pretty bad board to bet the flop with to begin with, given Bulldog should have a whole lot of high cards in his range. So it's kind of hard to find a whole lot of draws for Doug to bet, given King Jack and King 10 may not even want to bluff on the flop or the turn. So, realize we're being long-winded here. All this is to say is that I think Doug's going to be weighted towards value hands when he 1.3x pots a turn on this somewhat brick turn card. So because of that, I think the Ace 8 should just get out of the way, because if Doug keeps betting on the river, Ace 8's going to be in a really, really nasty scenario. And if it does go check, there's no guarantee that the Ace 8's even good, because Doug could be betting the turn with something like Ace 9, Ace 10, especially Ace King or Ace Jack, right? So I think the Ace 8 just needs to let it go so you don't end up dying with 0. Let's head to the river.
Does not come, but both players hit trips, and Doug with the boat.
Row your boat gently down the river for Doug, and the worst card for Bill to see, the Ace of Hearts.
River is the Ace of Hearts, an absolute disaster for Bill Perkins, because now he went from having a pretty junky made hand to a pretty good made hand. He checks. And at this point, Doug has to figure out how much to bet. I personally think Doug is a master of getting full value with his good hands. What I want to know is that how much do you think he's going to bet in this situation? Bill has $132,000 in his stack. The pot is $58,000. Is Doug going to bet $15,000, $30,000, $60,000, or all in? Take a second. Think about what you think Doug's going to do, and let me know in the comment section down below.
Back-to-back big ones incoming for Doug.
Oh, this is going to hurt.
It hurts already.
Oh, my goodness.
Don't think there's any chance Bill folds.
The worst card.
The
for Bill
massive
to see.
overbet.
The absolute worst card Bill could have seen on the river.
Fun. I was at a space party. I was just hanging out. Play the net game, I said. It'll be fun.
$200K from Doug. All of Bill's chips. Looking into outer space, but the satellites cannot help you now, Bill. Lay it down and save some money, but nobody will fault you if you make the call. My money would have been in by now.
How can you fold?
After not too much thought, Doug does go for all of it. All in, a little bit more than 2x the size of the pot. This may be surprising to you because you may think, what could possibly call? Well, the answer is any ace. And we all know that Bill, and most people, don't really like folding trips. Now look, if the turn brought up more draws, like the 5 of diamonds instead of the 5 of hearts, or the 9 of diamonds instead of the 5 of hearts, something like that, then I love the all-in. This is a spot where there aren't a whole lot of busted draws to begin with, which makes me think, again, this might just be overly value heavy, but if your opponent just doesn't fold an ace and may even hero call with a queen, then it becomes amazing. Let's see if it's a good bet or a bad bet.
I can only beat a bluff, Doug.
Doug stuck keeps, not interested in conversation, keeping it together. It's Bill and Bill's thoughts only. And what a brutal orbit this has been for him as he makes the call, right? He's about to just flick that chip in.
You can't fold.
He'd be a genius if he did. He's a pretty smart guy, Rick.
He's brilliant, but
He's not folding.
he's not folding.
No. We're at the funeral right now. We're going to say goodbye to those chips and hope for a reload. They're beautiful chips.
guys.
No, you can
Take your time. Take your time.
As long as you need.
Table showing Bill some respect. He's earned it. Approaching 7,000 in the live chat. We thank you for watching this stream. 4 times a week, you can find us here, Skull Mike and Slick Rick.
What's worse, you just.
No straights, no flushes.
No knit button
This
for
game?
Doug.
He shows the ace.
Doug just zoning in on the board, likes to stare at one spot in these situations.
I think Doug looks happy. He's like, oh, please call.
Bill just trying to get a read.
Mouth breather. I don't think I'm good enough to fold. 2,000 call. Bet, call.
Makes the call.
Yeah.
Of course, I mean,
Wow.
it's just the worst possible card on the river for Bill. 322,400, and that'll make a dent.
We have a discount special going.
After much deliberation, Bill makes the call, is shown the bad news, and gets stacked. I certainly don't fault Bill for making this call in this situation, especially given they're playing the nit game, given he just rivered 3 of a kind. I think you probably have to find the call. The problem, though, here is that Doug might go for this bet kind of thin with something like ace-10. If he's going to go as thin with something like ace-10 in this situation, and he may not bluff the turn with stuff like king-10, jack-10, random air balls like 10-9 of diamonds, stuff like that, then he doesn't really have a whole lot of bluffs in his range, especially given it was a multi-way pot, and you don't want to be bluffing too many low or no equity hands multi-way on the turn. So While I do think Bill probably should have folded both the flop and the turn, I don't really fault him for calling on the river, because whenever you have 3 of a kind, you block a whole lot of your opponent's nut hands, like ace-queen, ace-6, ace-5. So, sometimes you gotta call, and sometimes you die with 0. I'll talk to you next time.